A quick question about Hello, folks. Can you hear me?
Hi, David. Yes, we can hear you. Finally.
I'm so sorry.
That doesn't matter.
So problematic getting signed in here. We've had a power outage.
It is great to see and hear your voice.
Well, thank you very much. And once again, so sorry that it's taken some time to
That
get in
doesn't
here.
that doesn't matter. It is the technology has always problem that we can encounter.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So I'm calling things up right now. So can you, let me just see if I can share screen here.
Okay, then I would like to give a brief information about your speech. Yes, the Professor Dr. David Fennell from Brock University in Ontario, Canada. He will do today's second keynote speech. And the topic is titled The Tourism Knowledge Translation Framework, Bridging the Canyon Between Theory and Practice.
Thank you.
Yes, David, if you are ready, then you can start with your keynote speech.
Right.
We are excited to listen.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. No, now you can see just your face.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
We cannot
share
see the
screen here. Let's try that.
I think it is progressing. Yes, now it is okay, but not full screen.
Okay, here we go. Let's see. And I also have a very, very old, tired computer here that continues to give me some issues here. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And I do apologize about the delay. The presentation, I know I've wasted a bit of time here, so I'll move through a little quicker than I would otherwise normally. So the Tourism Knowledge Translation Framework, Bridging the Canyon Between Theory and Practice. Let's see where we go here. There it is. Okay, so the introduction is to, well, the study stems from the TriNet COVID-19 discussion on how research should aid practice. Times of crisis demand new questions and new answers about the way forward in tourism. So we all know that closed borders, quarantines, cancellations, diminished revenue, lost employment are all problems. As you can see on the right-hand side, closed for good. These are tourism industries right around the world. So the US hotel industry expected to end 2021 down 500,000 jobs. Globally, 1 million jobs lost per day. So this is indeed significant. And what we need to do is we need to wrap our heads around every opportunity to try to come together in theory and practice to help solve these issues. So what I pulled from our TriNet in the sort of the incipient beginning stages of the COVID-19 crisis are a couple of quotes. Whilst I appreciate that academia is here to theorize, wouldn't it be great if this theory could provide realistic solutions directly applicable to the tourism industry? It may be just me, but I'm increasingly struggling with how much academic research is disconnected from reality. And then Jafar Jafari, your message conveys what some of us have tried to say or do elsewhere, but with limited success. Yes, there is a gap, actually a canyon, between theory, academia, and practice in tourism with no established bridges connecting the two. So this is the state in which we find ourselves. There it goes. All right. So what are some of the research practice impediments that we have? Scholars with little or no industry experience or interest, and the failure to write findings in a language suitable for practitioners and policymakers. So this is in the literature. It's not only in our discussions with over TriNet on COVID-19. This is something that's been problematic for years. And fledgling, little transmission of knowledge is taking place from leading journals to industry practitioners. And of course, poor connections between scholars and practitioners and government. And in Canada, I can't imagine it actually being worse in terms of the connection that exists between academics, industry, and government. So we really do struggle here with this issue. I'm not going to spend much time on knowledge transfer or knowledge management. This is just to suggest that there is a body of knowledge out there that deals with both of these. So knowledge transfer process underpin innovation, which in turn are the key to competitiveness for tourism organizations and destinations, and knowledge management, identification, measurement, storage, organization, replication, sharing, and integration of knowledge. The thing is that both of these, knowledge transfer and knowledge management, are generally used for competitive advantage in the industry. Okay, so what I'm going to propose today is significantly different. And it starts with the Canadian Institutes of Health Research and the World Health Organization have jumped on this model that has been used in Canada for bridging the gap between theory and practice. So to place new knowledge into the hands of policymakers and practitioners as quickly as possible in avoiding research practice gaps. Research says that this can take upwards of 10 years in healthcare. So we know how important it is to get new knowledge into the hands of people in the healthcare industry. But sometimes I would think takes much longer in the tourism industry to get from where we start and end with our research and getting into the hands, if indeed it gets into the hands of practitioners and policymakers at all. So we need to be concerned with what should be transferred, to whom and by whom should research knowledge be transferred, how should knowledge be transferred, and with what effect. So here's knowledge translation. This is a dynamic and iterative process that includes the synthesis, dissemination, and exchange, and ethically sound application of knowledge to improve health, provide more effective health services and products, and strengthen the healthcare system. Okay, so this is the definition that comes from health, right? And that which I'm going to use and apply in a tourism context as we get through a few more slides here. So knowledge translation in healthcare was developed to overcome two major issues: the volume of research, and this is mind-boggling to me, 17,000 new biomedical books per year, 30,000 biomedical journals. Physicians would need to read on average 19 original articles each day to keep abreast of the field. And also, secondly, is that just really the complicated nature of scientific work. It's very difficult for practitioners and policymakers to sometimes understand the things that we do. So here is, there's two components here. You see the inverted triangle in the middle. This is our knowledge creation. So that's A. And then B on the outside is you'll see our action cycle. So what I'm going to do is sequentially go through and look at knowledge creation, all right, knowledge inquiry, synthesis, and the products and tools that we use in tailoring our knowledge. And then we're going to go through this action cycle. And I won't go through each and every one of the steps right now, but we'll see these in short order. Okay, so here's the first one. This is our knowledge creation. Knowledge inquiry marked by knowledge distillation and fluidity, primary research of a quantitative and qualitative nature, which includes, and I think this is very important for us. It's not just hardcore quantitative research, but also qualitative. What stories are we going to be using? What philosophies, what conceptual frameworks are we going to be using? And I've always placed a lot of stock in transdisciplinarity. This is not just a disciplinary perspective or an interdisciplinary perspective where we have two disciplines or multiple disciplines together, but transdisciplinary begs an approach that uses people from the community and other stakeholders to be sharing in this knowledge creation process. Okay, so synthesis is the second step here, is to focus on pooling the potential of global research rather than individual studies. We want research quality, so only the best studies would be put into a repository, as we'll talk about in a second, and the need for best evidence for policy and practice. Okay, and the third step in this inverted triangle is the methods and tools in a repository. So methods could be a series of steps to organize a knowledge translation activity, a framework to create knowledge dissemination plan, or it could be tools, products, or instruments to carry out the steps of a knowledge translation activities. For example, a checklist for your dissemination plan, right? And I'm just using sources that come from the healthcare field in order to sort of substantiate what's being said here. Now, you might ask how we might accomplish this end. You know, sources are submitted to and subject to prioritization and review 3 times by knowledge translation specialists. So what I'm suggesting here is that we need to hire to include knowledge translation specialists into what we're doing. So the first reviewer writes a summary statement, a second review for verification independent of the first review, a review checked by the original author for accuracy before being posted into this knowledge translation repository. And there's other elements that could be used here, right? Or a number of things that we could use to translate and communicate new information to people who are in policy and practice. We could use, I can't see the top of my screen there, but briefs. We could use glossaries. We could use infographics. We could use issue-based newsletters. and I've got reports underlined here, which consist of knowledge exchange papers, research results, technical reports, and peer-reviewed publications. Many of the things that we do, obviously on an ongoing basis, that could be augmented by resource spotlights, videos and podcasts, webinars. I just did a webinar, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, for the Smart Community Tourism Initiative for Jafar Jafari. So there's a number of ways that we can get that knowledge out there and share it with our colleagues. So the second component here is our action cycle. So this follows a traditional systematic action planning format. We identify a problem, we identify, review, and select knowledge, we adapt knowledge to the local context, we assess barriers to knowledge use, we select, tailor, implement solutions, we monitor, we evaluate, and we try to sustain this knowledge over a long period of time. Okay, and what I'm going to do now, here's our lovely Niagara Falls, which is about 20 minutes away from it's a world-class attraction, world-class destination. It's about 20 minutes away from where I live. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this, or apply it rather, to a tourism context. So how does knowledge translation work in tourism? I've just redefined it as a dynamic and iterative process that includes the synthesis, dissemination, exchange, and ethically sound application of knowledge to improve policy, planning, development, and management of tourism at all scales. Okay, so this is our task ahead, is to use this very quickly, with apologies, on a case study of over-tourism in Corsica in France. We're going to use Scandola Marine Protected Area. It was developed in 1975, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, developed in 1983. 300,000 visitors between June and August. Impacts on, and this, as you see on the right-hand side, is an osprey. We have these in Canada. Indeed, there's many of them right around the world. So the impacts on the osprey population, no limit on the number of visiting vessels, as you can see on the left-hand side, and no approach distance regulations. So there's not a lot of regulations here. So let's go through this process again. We need to, and apply it to the case study. We need to access current knowledge from various knowledge domains, synthesize, and which products and tools might be developed for policy and practitioner use. I use Monty's paper, a biologist and colleagues, to look at this from, again, a biological standpoint, to pull it into tourism studies. So what Monty says is we need more collaboration needed with the tourism industry, not just biologists, but here's the use of the tourism industry. I would go even a little bit further to use that transdisciplinary approach, and the need for evidence-based scientific data to address the situation. So they're calling for evidence-based scientific data to help with this issue. I'm sorry that this is so small, but what I've been forced to do, not forced to do, but what I've elected to do, is set up an academic, 3 tiers of academic knowledge. And on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side, industry sectors and products. And these collide in the middle on this research industry zone of intersection for knowledge, tourism knowledge translation. Tier 1 knowledge is simply our basic fields and disciplines like gender studies, geography, leisure studies, and anthropology. What I've done is I've pulled together philosophy and business, and that creates business ethics. And so what really I've done is taken the main themes from the Journal of Business Ethics in tier 3 and just identified all the different areas that we can draw knowledge from. And at the bottom of this slide, I've included STEM knowledge, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics in terms of technology, as well as sustainability, sustainable citizenship, poverty, inequality, and such. And then I've identified on the other side in A, industry sectors and products, and I've looked at what are the primary sectors: accommodation, food and beverage, transportation, travel, trade, and tourism services, and then some of the primary products. And what we're doing is identifying what those primary sectors and products and how they apply to the case study that we're using, and where we can draw knowledge from on the right-hand side and pull those and intersect those for knowledge translation in tourism. Okay, that's a very quick overview of what's taking place there, but just to give you a sense of how we can use that knowledge and apply it in a tourism context. So our action cycle is, well, the problem, there's a higher and unregulated tourism in the reserve has led to lower breeding performance of osprey. Studied between 1977 and 2014, there's no attributed, the decline is not attributed to a decline in prey species, so it's not something that's taking place with prey. This is strictly a tourism-related issue and set of problems. The 3 times the number of boats inside the reserve than outside, and there is stress decrease in hunting, more time flying off nests, and other associated problems that have been identified here. So what we need to do following this systematic planning process, identify, review, and select knowledge. Okay, so we identify the stakeholders and their roles, park staff, tourism operators, destination marketing organization or management organizations. We review causes and effects of the issue with stakeholders, address expected outcomes and potential interventions. And then we would select knowledge from this repository that we talked about. What are the ecological impacts in marine protected areas? Stress responses in animals from tourism, zoning, codes of ethics, animal ethics. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we could put in this repository that would help us mitigate this problem. Secondly, we adapt this knowledge to the local context. So how to use this knowledge in Corsica, all right? This knowledge may not in our repository be directly associated or affiliated with Corsica. So we adapt it to Corsica, the process of updating knowledge, gauging success of past mitigating factors and permits, and how much moral free space between our cosmopolitan values and priorities and the case study. So how is it this universal knowledge, how can we tailor make it to Corsica, allowing for some free space and for some free moral space of the people who actually live and work there to do things in their own way, but also couched in a broader sense of some of the normative rules and regulations that we need to mitigate this problem. Thirdly, to assess barriers to knowledge use. What are the, so individual skill sets. So maybe the people who have been hired are having problems negotiating the issues that are taking place with the marine protected area. Maybe there's some organizational weaknesses in terms of weak leadership. What are some of the system gaps, social and ecological? What are some of the legal, administrative, political, natural, resource, economic, and social cultural conditions that dictate policy for the marine protected area? What is the difference between profit and pleasure versus preservation? And on the right-hand side, I've got, maybe this is just incompatible. Maybe we've got a situation where mass tourism is competing with alternative tourism, and we haven't quite sorted that out. And so maybe we just don't have the right knowledge in place in order to allow us to mitigate the problem. So then we need to select, tailor, and implement solutions. So what are the resources available for change? What about stakeholder inclusion? New skills, training, human resource demands, and stakeholder flexibility. And of course, education, everything we should do becomes so very important in helping move from hindsight on the right-hand side to insight to foresight in a strategic visioning process from the past to the present to the future. So visioning becomes very important as a community. What do we value? Often we're not sure. And so maybe we need to embrace some innovative processes here to move this agenda forward. So what I'm suggesting here is that we need oftentimes rather system shocks like COVID-19, like over-tourism, catalyze new innovations. We see this with the amount and volume of research that's taking place in our field right now that is dedicated specifically to COVID-19. So innovation is a journey. We follow it different stages and different pathways. And I won't explain this because I don't have the time. That Van de Ven and colleagues, their innovation journeys provide a lot of insight in terms of where we need to go through initiation, through development, and through implementation, which stimulates new thinking, new technologies. What about demarketing? There's a number of things that we could build into this case study, as we'll talk about in a second, to help fix the problem. One of the bits of research that I've been involved in recently is personalized interactive real-time tours. So these are 5G streaming in real time using 360-degree view cameras, webcams, drones with appropriate infrastructure. Change how we consume tourism experiences. Now you can sit in your living room and take a tour, for example, in Costa Rica on the right-hand side and talk to this guide in real time. Maybe this provides an opportunity for us to lessen some of the impact that's taking place in some of these overused areas. So tourists consume products at home or remotely as alternative hedonists. Means that we gain pleasure in some of the things that we do as consumers, but we know that there's positive outcomes that are taking place at these destinations. Maybe persons with disabilities are going to benefit from this, sustainable citizens, and maybe there's going to be some social costs of flying and over tourism in the past as we advance to a more sustainable and responsible future. Right. And so we could also access other parts of the supply chain in flying food up. This is a little bit contentious because now we're using planes to fly food up to people who are sitting in their living rooms. drinking coffee from Costa Rica, for example, whilst at the same time enjoying this type of an experience. So as it relates to Corsica, creation of visitor centers with live streaming, sending fewer boats to the birds, developing a lottery system to see the birds. So now you get to see them only if you've been chosen in a lottery. What else can we do with demarketing? As you can see on the right-hand side, we've got the Mighty 5 campaign, brought an extra 5.5 million visitors to parks. Now Utah wants to steer them to other places. We are just simply loving these places to death. And so maybe we could use a demarketing strategy in addition to some of these other options I'm suggesting to help fix the problem. The issue is that PIRT might experience or catalyze even more interest in the osprey. So this is something that is new and something that we'd have to keep an eye on. Next, we go into monitoring. We're almost there, folks, just a few more slides, but the type of knowledge used from quantitative to storytelling and their outcomes. We could look at monitoring tourist to local density markers, boat traffic inside and outside the park, tourist local conflict ratios, impacts on osprey and other flora and fauna, as well as seasonality. Those are all important aspects that we could use to build into a monitoring strategy. We would then evaluate outcomes, develop key collaborative relationships based on trust and cooperation, how the industry gets along with academics and with tourists and with other stakeholders, and a reciprocal altruism type of an arrangement. What are the iterative properties of tourism knowledge translation? Problems not solved will demand new knowledge in the future. So we keep building on the successes and the failures to make sure that in the future we are able to overcome some of the challenges. And as new methods and tools are added to the repository, teams will be better prepared to address the issue. And then just the last one here before we get into some conclusions. Questions emerge in relation to who should be empowered to sustain the initiative, ongoing and emerging barriers to sustainability, the need, and here's the one that I've dealt with for many, many years in my research. What's the will to get this stuff done, the willpower for all of us to get on the same page to make these changes, to crystallize priorities around the long-term management of osprey alongside tourism benefits. This really necessitates a leap of faith in pulling together all of us on the same page. So let's wrap up with some assumptions, questions, and conclusions. Tourism knowledge translation framework gets practitioners, policymakers, and academics speaking the same language. What role does government play as a catalyst? How is this funded? These are big questions. Should be free for the industry to use to induce participation? Absolutely. We shouldn't be charging people to use this knowledge translation framework, right? This is how we build excellence. And to remove as many barriers as possible for a knowledgeable tourism industry. In the future, will the value of tourism change relative to healthcare? Health is a primary concern. Tourism is a secondary concern. But what are the health of an industry? Lost jobs, livelihoods, diminishing mental and physiological health. COVID has shown us that there is a very strong connection between the health field and the tourism field, and we can't discount that. This provides us with an excellent opportunity to open the doors for another connection with a vital discipline and field of research that we could use to build more connectivity. Will there be challenges around different stakeholders having different priorities? Absolutely. Scholars placing more emphasis on sustainability, justice, equality, and responsibility. Industry more on profit and competitive advantage. Understand human nature to understand human impacts becomes very important. And once again, this has been a very important aspect of my research in the past. We have impacts, and we don't understand impacts in tourism because we don't understand human nature. We ascribe it to broad, structural, social, cultural, economic, and ecological. We need to take a step back and understand human nature if we're ever going to get beyond some of these impacts. Should we develop an international model with a hub and regional nodes through other universities? Absolutely. Training of knowledge translation brokers. Brock University, my university, has just hired one in healthcare. So yes, we need to have brokers who are knowledge translators to be built into this model. But if not tourism knowledge translation, then what? Will journals pick up the slack in moving research into practice? Do we need an adapted TriNet, a TKT net to better connect research and practice? We do need something though, don't we? Because clearly this has been a problem for 40 to 50 years in our field, and it's not getting any better. Let me wrap it up there. I once again apologize for the delay in getting online with you, and I will pivot out of this, and I'm not sure, Kadir, what the next steps are, but I'd be certainly willing to take any questions if there's any that are being offered. Hello? We still there? Oh, goodness. I was muted the whole time.
Hi, David. Thank you very much for the informative and invaluable presentation, which provided us very broad information and knowledge about the knowledge, translation of knowledge. And does anyone have any questions to Professor Dr. David Fennell regarding his interesting presentation? This silence says no, and overall your presentation was precise, clear, and understandable, David, I think.
Well, I would be interested to know whether some of the challenges that we have in Canada are similar to some of the challenges that you have in Turkey, for example.
Oh, sorry, here I should direct a question from Daniel Olsen to everyone.
Oh, sorry. I guess I'm going to have to open up the chat. Can you just read it to me?
What happens when you want to transfer knowledge, but the key stakeholders on the ground are not interested in your research?
Oh, God, I have it now. Sorry. I've just opened up the chat. So what happens when you want to transfer knowledge? Well, I guess, Daniel, that's an interesting question. I hope that we would never, ever be in a situation where that would be the case. I mentioned in my presentation that this is where we are in Canada. We don't seem to want to be on the same page. And so this is a very real challenge for us. I've just used healthcare as an example of why it's so necessary, because people's lives are at stake. We don't have good knowledge in the hands of practitioners, then there's a problem. I tried to make the analogy that, there's a crossover with tourism and with healthcare now. We've got people who are not only losing lives, but losing businesses and challenges with regions and places around the world, that I think this is kind of a do or die situation for us. So my hope would be that we embrace a model like this. If stakeholders choose not to, then I think that we live by the sword and die by the sword. If there's challenges in their industries and such, then challenges with their organizations and sectors, then I guess we're going to have to live with that. But my hope is that, education unlocks doors for us. And this is another manner in which we can educate ourselves to be better and more successful within our industry. Good question, though. It's one I hadn't considered, but it's a good question.
Okay, thank you for your answer and for the question to Daniel. Now, I think there is no any more question for your presentation, as far as I can see. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. David Fennell, and for sharing your valuable time and the knowledge through your presentation. I think will enlightening us.
Well, let me just.
It was really a great honor for us to host you on our international event and congress. On behalf of my colleagues and the organizing committee, I would like to thank once again for your time and consideration and such a interesting presentation, David.
So, well, thank you very much. And I would just offer that this paper was published last year. If anybody's interested in it, or if anybody's interested in contact and further discussion on it, I'd be more than happy to chat with them.
Well, David, last question, if you have time.
Yep.
Should I direct you? And Serkan Yiğit has already sent the question of how education will change.
Well, another very good question. So education probably should change. In Canada, we often have people who are working in the tourism industry who have not gone through formal education in tourism. They may have business backgrounds, or they may not have business backgrounds. So I think what we would quite normally do is given that fact, is that we would try to open up this new channel of knowledge translation for those who are in hospitality and tourism programs, right, is the first place to change. I also think that we should be developing new literacy programs for people who are actually working in the field. I'm doing this now with Tourism Animals and Ethics. I've created a literacy program on animal welfare, for example, that tourism operators can use to help them improve the ways in which they use. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't use animals in tourism. What I'm suggesting is that we should use them in a more responsible and sustainable manner. If we can develop literacy programs for wildlife tourism attractions, for example, we can certainly also develop literacy programs for tourism knowledge translation to make sure and available information is provided for people working within the industry. And it could be broken down on the basis of sectors. So people for example, transportation could have access to knowledge that would help them improve their efficiencies within transportation. And hopefully they could see the virtue in that. Through these literacy programs, change their mindset. And I think, it's always bit small steps as we implement levels of change. We don't see massive changes that are taking place. This is going to take some time, but I do think that there's a healthy amount of self-interest built into what we do. We oftentimes say, if it's good for me, if I could be advantaged from this, then I'll use it. So I think we really, in terms of education, I think we need to channel that information first and foremost into how we can demonstrate people working in the tourism, how this is going to be advantageous to them.
Okay, thank you very much again for your response. Okay, does anyone have any question to Professor David Fennell? No, I think there is no any question. Okay, thank you very much again. I think another question. What do you think about the recent prominence of the concept of sustainability in tourism, especially in Turkey? This is another question.
Yeah. Well, I think this is what we're faced with globally, not only in Turkey. And I understand that there are I've just been reading the news recently, and there's some challenges, some financial challenges that are taking place in Turkey right now. And I'm so sorry to hear that. And it's adding more challenge to a challenging situation, not only within the tourism industry, but elsewhere. But, I've spent a lot of time thinking about sustainable tourism and have just finished a book last year with Chris Cooper on sustainable tourism. So I've been thinking a lot about it. I don't think we really have a choice, in terms of where we are right now. We are, a global population that's so large, that's utilizing resources at such a rapid rate that, I did mention competitive advantage in tourism. I think we're going to get to the point in the near future where those tourism companies that are being more sustainable are going to be the ones that international travelers are going to select. The ones that have eco labels, the ones that can prove sustainability in all sorts of different sectors and operations. Corporate social responsibility becomes very important here. That I think more and more the international market is going to be requiring of Turkey to be more sustainable in terms in capturing an international market that's very competitive. If you want to draw tourists in, more and more tourists into your country, rather, prove how sustainable that you are now and in the future. We've got a company in Canada, the Halliburton Sustainable Forest, that has a 100-year business plan. And that 100-year business plan is to return the forest back to a natural homeostasis. They use tourism in which to do that. So they haven't placed tourism above everything else. They've put ecological integrity above everything else, right? And so what they've done is they've used tourism to earn money. So you see how their values have changed. It's not about profit. It's about ecological preservation. And that has attracted a number of tourists to this destination because they're sympathetic to the needs and to the responsibility and to the sustainability initiatives that are built into that. That's only one example. a tremendous number of examples around the world, but I really do think that if Turkey and indeed other countries in the future want to be competitive, that sustainability has to be front and center.
I think there is another question. If you have time, I would like to direct you from our audiences. Dilara Bahtiyar Sarı. First of all, it is great to see you here. I studied ecotourism in my master's thesis and read a lot of your books. I would like to get your opinion on something. Do you think zoos can be considered as a form of ecotourism? What do you think about this subject?
Okay. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. Thank you so much for the comment, and I hope the books were useful. And please reach out to me. Is it Dilara? Is that the pronunciation, Dilara?
Yes.
Please, Dilara, reach out to me if you have any other questions. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about this. I don't think zoos are a form of ecotourism in any way, shape, or form. The reason is because they keep animals captive. Ecotourism should be about normal behavior. Animals in the wild practicing normal behavior in a way that's not subject to manipulation. Zoos have a place, right? But when you take that away from animals, when you take that ability to live freely in the natural world, and we're only talking about ecotourism here, I would always say that zoo is not a form of ecotourism for that purpose. If you want to call it nature-based tourism, if you want to call it other forms of tourism, go for it. But for me, ecotourism is about animals living freely in the wild, able to disengage their interactions with us whenever they feel they want to disengage, not whenever we feel it's important for them to disengage. That's true ecotourism. True ecotourism is ethical and responsible. It doesn't control and manipulate animals for pleasure and for profit in that way.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. Any other question? No, there is no any other question.
Okay. Well,
thank you very much again, David.
You're very welcome, and I do apologize again for my technical.
That doesn't matter.
My technical issues in this end. This is something that I'm afraid is inherent.
That doesn't matter.
I do apologize.
Very much. Very informative and rich presentation that you have made for us. And we look forward to working with you again in the future, especially for such international events. We hope also that you have enjoyed by participating and presenting your interesting keynote speech for our international congress, I think.
Yeah, well, I really thank you very much for the opportunity to do that. It was a pleasure. It's something that I think is very important for the industry, and I probably went through it a little quicker than I would normally go through that. But I'm very happy to collaborate with you in the future. So if there's anything that there's some connections, then please reach out, and I would be happy to chat about any number of different things.
Thank you very much, David.
All the best to all of you. Right.
Take care and stay safe.
Good health. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.